The March 16th, 2021 meeting of the Woodbridge Township Board of Education will please come to order. Roll call, Mr. Secretary.
Mr. Delapietro.
Here.
Mr. Harris.
Here.
Mr. Molnar.
Here.
Mr. Sedana.
Here.
Mr. Treebwasser.
Here.
Mr. Velez.
Here.
Ms. Anderson.
Here.
Mr. Tamburello.
Tamburello.
Mr. Tamburello. Here. Thank you.
Mr. Secretary, as required by the Sunshine Law, please read the notice of meetings.
Thank you, Madam President. The New Jersey Open Public Meetings Law was enacted to ensure the right of the public to have advance notice of and to attend the meetings of public bodies at which any business affecting their interest is discussed or acted upon. In accordance with the provisions of this Act, the Board of Education has caused notice of this meeting to be published by having the date, time, and place thereof posted as follows. On January 11th, 2021, and March 5th, 2021, emailed to the Home News Tribune, the Star Ledger, and the Municipal Clerk's Office, posted in Ross Street, School Number 11, and the Board of Education Administration Building, also published on the school district website.
Thank you. Mr. Secretary, please note Ms. Burdan is here.
So noted.
Mr. Velez, please read the closed session statement.
I would like to make a motion for the approval of the following closed session statement. In compliance with the Sunshine Law, the board must go into closed session in order to discuss subjects exempted from the public portion of our meeting. Discussions to be held in closed session will be regarding personnel matters. In addition, the board will receive attorney-client advice on a matter of pending litigation. Any information regarding the closed session discussion will be released to the public when the reasons for discussing these matters in closed session no longer exist.
I have a motion by Mr. Velez,
Second.
seconded by Mr. Treebwasser. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried. Please stand for the salute to the flag, moment of silence. Do I have a motion to reconvene?
So motion. Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Molnar, seconded by Mr. Delapietro. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried. Roll call, Mr. Secretary.
Ms. Bordan?
Here.
Mr. Delapietro?
Here.
Mr. Harris?
Here.
Mr. Molnar?
Here.
Mr. Sedana?
Here.
Mr. Tamburello?
Here.
Mr. Treebwasser?
Yes.
Mr. Velez?
Yes?
Ms. Anderson?
Here. Will someone make a motion to approve the minutes of the previous meeting?
So motion. Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Treebwasser, second by Mr. Delapietro. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried. Mr. Secretary, please state for the record any notice of bids received by the board.
Madam President, on March 9th, 2021, we opened PSA Project 8170 KPES Corridor Additions at School 24 and 22, and also on March 9th, 2021, we opened PSA Project 8170 AES Heat Renovations at School 18.
Thank you. Dr. Zaga, please state for the record the superintendent's reports for the month of February 2021.
Madam President, I'd like to present the following monthly reports: the student registers and fire drill report, suspension reports for elementary and secondary schools, bomb threat reports, and the reports of the attendance officers.
Thank you. To facilitate the flow of this meeting, all questions and comments from the public will be addressed after the presentation of all agendas. By order of the governor, all attendees must observe social distancing guidelines and wear masks for the entirety of the meeting. Dr. Zaga, do you have any recommendations?
I have 10 items to present to the board.
Do I have a motion for the superintendent's agenda?
So motion.
I have a motion by Mr. Treebwasser, second by Mr. Delapietro. Are there any comments or questions from the board? Roll call, Mr. Secretary.
Ms. Bordan?
Yes.
Mr. Delapietro?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Molnar?
Yes.
Mr. Sedana?
Yes.
Mr. Tamburello? Mr. Treebwasser?
Yes.
Mr. Velez?
Yes.
Ms. Anderson?
Yes. Policy and Planning Agenda, Mr. Harris.
Thank you, Ms. Anderson. The Policy and Planning Committee, on recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, presents the following 7 items. I move for the adoption of the foregoing.
I have a motion by Mr. Harris.
Second.
Second by Mr. Sedana. Are there any comments or questions from the board? Mr. Harris?
Yes, thank you very much. Just wanted to make mention of item number 2 on our tonight's agenda. The board is being asked to consider a resolution urging the federal government to suspend the standardized testing for our students this year. Testing has its place to measure progress and growth, among other things, but this year, under the circumstances, our students should not be losing nearly a week's worth of schooling. So the board is being asked this evening to send a message to the federal government and to the state of New Jersey that we should consider suspending the NJSLA test this year. So thank you for the board's consideration on that.
Yes. Roll call, Mr. Secretary.
Ms. Bourdain?
Yes.
Mr. Delapetro?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Molnar,
Yes.
Mr. Sedana?
Yes.
Mr. Tamburello?
Yes.
Mr. Treebwasser?
Yes.
Mr. Velez?
Yes.
Ms. Anderson?
Yes. Curriculum, Mr. Treebwasser.
Thank you, Madam President. The Curriculum Committee, on recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools and the Assistant Superintendent of Curriculum and Instruction, presented the following 6 items. I move for the adoption of the foregoing.
I have a motion by Mr. Treebwasser.
Second.
Second by Ms. Bourdain. Are there any comments or questions from the board? Roll call, Mr. Secretary.
Ms. Bourdain?
Yes.
Mr. Delapetro? Yes. Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Molnar,
Yes.
Mr. Sedana?
Yes.
Mr. Tamburello?
Yes.
Mr. Treebwasser?
Yes.
Mr. Velez?
Yes.
Ms. Anderson?
Yes. Finance and Insurance, Mr. Tamburello.
Thank you, Madam President. The Finance and Insurance Committee, on recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools and the Business Administrator Board Secretary, presents the following 18 items. Can you hear that? I present the following 18 items. This evening, I move for the adoption of the foregoing 18 items.
I have a motion by Mr. Tamburello.
Second by Mr. Treebwasser. Are there any comments or questions from the board? Mr. Tamburello?
Yeah, thank you. Mr. Wolferman, item number 10 is the budgeted amount for next school year. I just want to verify and confirm with you that this is not what the final tax levy is. That's what the next month is about, our meetings on locking down final numbers. I just want to confirm that and verify that with you, correct?
Through the president?
Mr. Wolferman?
Mr. Tamburello, that is correct. This number is just a accumulated total. It does not define what we will be doing in terms of tax levy or budgeted line items.
There's a bit of an echo, but I think I got what I needed. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? Roll call, Mr. Secretary.
Ms. Bourdain?
Yes.
Mr. Delapetro?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Molnar,
Yes.
Mr. Sedana?
Yes.
Mr. Tamburello? Mr. Treebwasser?
Yes.
Mr. Velez?
Yes.
Ms. Anderson?
Yes. Security and School Safety, Mr. Velez.
Thank you, Madam President. The Security and School Safety Committee, on the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, present the following 1 item. I move for the adoption of the foregoing.
I have a motion by Mr. Velez,
Second.
seconded by Mr. Treebwasser. Are there any comments or questions from the board? Roll call, Mr. Secretary.
Ms. Bourdain?
Yes.
Mr. Delapetro?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Molnar,
Yes.
Mr. Sedana?
Yes.
Mr. Tamburello?
Yes.
Mr. Treebwasser?
Yes.
Mr. Velez?
Yes.
Ms. Anderson?
Yes. Athletics and Extracurricular Agenda, Mr. Molnar.
Thank you, Madam President. The Athletics and Extracurricular Committee, on the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools and the Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum and Instruction, presents the following. Tonight, I'll be moving 1 item.
I have a motion by Mr. Molnar,
Second.
second by Ms. Bourdain. Are there any comments or questions from the board? Seeing none, roll call, Mr. Secretary?
Ms. Bourdain?
Yes.
Mr. Delapetro?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Molnar,
Yes.
Mr. Sedana?
Yes.
Mr. Tamburello?
Yes.
Mr. Treebwasser?
Yes.
Mr. Velez?
Yes.
Ms. Anderson?
Yes. Buildings and Grounds, Mr. Harris.
Thank you, Ms. Anderson. The Buildings and Grounds Committee, on recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools and Business Administrator, present the following 2 items. I move for the adoption of the foregoing.
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Harris, seconded by Mr. Sedana. Are there any comments or questions from the board?
Ms. Anderson?
Mr. Harris?
At your direction this morning, I'm providing a update on the 2020 referendum that was passed 1 year ago, this past Wednesday. I want to thank Dr. Zega for putting together a comprehensive list of all those accomplishments that we've achieved in the past year. Also want to extend, I'm sure in terms of doing the work, and compiling all the work, that credit also goes to Mr. Wolferman and Mr. Impaglia, among others. So thank you. So here's the update on the 65 projects. I'm not going to update every single one of them, but progress has been made in the past 367 days. Excuse me, last Wednesday, all right, more than 367, all right. The new school 4 and 5 construction design is 90% complete. We're awaiting Department of Education and Department of Environmental Protection approval to begin construction. The Woodbridge High School water main has been completed. The middle school electrical upgrades have begun, and that work will be done later in the fall. The boiler replacement at School 20 and Islam Middle School has been completed. New ceilings and lighting, that project has been completed at Schools 1, 9, and 19. The School 25 addition, as well as the School 28 addition, both of those construction bids will be going out this spring. The additions, i.e. the hallways at Schools 22 and 24, those bids were opened last week, and construction will be beginning probably in the months ahead. The JFK Fieldhouse renovation, that bid is going out in April. The HVAC upgrades at School 18 are under bid. The rooftop air conditioning at the middle schools and high schools, those are in the planning stages. The middle school STEM, AKA science laboratories, are under design at the moment. Safety and security, the camera upgrades and entrance enhancements are under design. And last but not least, the parking lot renovations at elementary schools 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, and 27 are under design this summer. So that is a brief summary of the 65 projects that were approved by you, the voters. And once again, we thank you for you as residents trusting us with $87 million of borrowed money to enhance our schools. We thank you very much. Thank you, Ms. Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. Roll call.
Madam President, I just
Mr.
have one
Molnar.
question. Through the chair, item 1 I see is for asbestos abatement. Item 2 is for a new floor in the all-purpose room. Is the asbestos abatement having to do with the old tiles that were on the floor in there, or is there other parts of the building that the abatement's being done?
Through the president?
Mr. Wolferman?
Mr. Molnar, yes. This is related to the tiles that are in the all-purpose room and then replacing the floor.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, roll call, Mr.
Roll call.
Secretary?
Ms. Bourdain?
Yes.
Mr. Delapetro?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Molnar,
Yes.
Mr. Sedana?
Yes.
Mr. Tamburello? Mr. Treebwasser?
Yes.
Mr. Velez?
Yes.
Ms. Anderson?
Yes. Transportation, Mr. Delapetro.
Thank you, Madam President. The Transportation Committee, on recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools and the Business Administrator, Board Secretary, presents the following 2 items. I move for the adoption of the foregoing.
I have a motion by Mr. Delapetro,
Second.
seconded by Ms. Bourdain. Are there any comments and questions from the board? Seeing none, roll call, Mr. Secretary?
Ms. Bourdain?
Yes.
Mr. Delapetro?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Molnar,
Yes.
Mr. Sedana?
Yes.
Mr. Tamburello?
Yes.
Mr. Treebwasser?
Yes.
Mr. Velez?
Yes.
Ms. Anderson?
Yes. Equity Commission, Mr. Treebwasser.
Thank you, Madam President. The Equity Commission, on recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools and the Business Administrator, Board Secretary, presents the following 2 items. I move for the adoption of the foregoing.
I have a motion by Mr. Treebwasser,
Second?
seconded by Mrs. Bourdain. Are there any comments or questions from the board? Roll call, Mr. Secretary.
Ms. Bourdain?
Yes.
Mr. Delapietro?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Molnar,
Yes.
Mr. Sedana?
Yes.
Mr. Tamburello?
Yes.
Mr. Treewasser?
Yes.
Mr. Velez?
Yes.
Ms. Anderson?
Yes. Personnel agenda, Mr. Molnar.
Thank you, Madam President. The Personnel Committee, on the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools and the Assistant Superintendent for Human Resources, presents the following. Tonight, I'll be moving 26 items.
I have a motion by Mr. Molnar,
Second.
seconded by Mr. Treewasser. Are there any comments or questions from the board? Roll call, Mr. Secretary.
Ms. Bourdain?
Yes.
Mr. Delapietro?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Molnar,
Yes.
Mr. Sedana?
Yes.
Mr. Tamburello?
Yes.
Mr. Treewasser?
On item 23, I will be abstaining on the name Michael Henderson, yes on all other items.
Mr. Velez?
Yes.
And Ms. Anderson?
Yes. Mr. Bush, do you have any recommendations?
Not at this time, Madam President.
Is there any old business that should be brought to the attention of the board? Is there any new business that should be brought to the attention of the board? Mr. Harris?
Ms. Anderson, President Anderson, thank you very much. Last week, Dr. Zega emailed the district. Ms. Anderson and I partnered up to advertise two great virtual programs for parents out there. One is taking place this week, this Thursday, in fact. It's called Spring into Healthy Eating for Kids. And then next Tuesday is Take Vape Away, to program to teach parents about the facts of e-cigarettes and vaping and some of those other, electronic smoking and so on and so forth. These programs are offered by Hackensack Meridian Hospital, one of the two largest hospital chains in the state of New Jersey. Again, Dr. Zega emailed out the information to the parents. I want to thank you again for that. You just have to register for those two virtual events. If you haven't done so, if you missed those emails, we'll make sure it's on our social media accounts through the district website as well as Dr. Zega's accounts. But if you didn't catch that, if you go to the website hackensackmeridianhealth.org/events, again, these two events are available free of charge to anyone who wishes to register, or you could call 1-800-560-9990. Again, two great informative programs, and I think, Ms. Anderson, we should make a habit of this, so whenever we see an appropriate free event, to get it out to our community. What do you think?
Absolutely, I agree.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. Anyone else?
Madam President?
Dr. Massimino?
Thank you, through Chair. I just want to give a shout out to, there's 10 of our school nurses that have dedicated their time to volunteer at the health center here in Woodbridge Township. They've been giving out vaccinations after their school day ends. They've been working on the weekends. So I just want to acknowledge those nurses that have been volunteering their time, very graciously helping out the community. They've been doing a tremendous job. So if you get a chance and see one of them, just be sure to say thank you.
Great job to our nurses. Now we will move to the public portion of our meeting. If you wish to say something, please come to the microphone, provide your name and the section of the township in which you reside for the record. Please limit your comments to no more than 5 minutes in accordance with Regulation Number 1100D. No response will be given until you have fully completed all of your comments, so as not to interrupt your 5-minute opportunity to speak. For those residents who are unable to attend tonight's meeting in person, you can email your comments to superintendent@woodbridge.k12.nj.us. Okay, Dr. Zega, do we have any emails been received from the public?
Yes, we do.
Could you read them?
First email is from Chantel Lehman. My name is Chantel, and I have 3 children at Pennsylvania Avenue School number 27. At this time, our school is still doing 2 half-days for children who have chosen to return to school. This is just not enough in-person learning for elementary-age children. We have children falling further and further behind us as hybrid schedule learning is being used. The mental health of our children is declining. COVID is not going away, so we need to come up with a plan that gets our children in the in-person education so they so desperately need. While the teachers are working hard to do their job, there is just no replacement for in-person learning. Scientific studies by the CDC have shown that schools are not a major contributor of COVID spread in the community. Children are being allowed to participate in indoor sports without face masks. So why can they not be within 6 feet in the classroom with masks and plexiglass? Numerous other districts have chosen to go back 5 days, half or full time. They've gotten plexiglass and adjusted classrooms for a 3-foot distance between desks. Some districts have been using 2 sessions in an AM and PM session. It has been over a year and nothing has changed in Woodbridge School District. I was told we are not going back full day due to limited capacity and the disinfecting of the school buses. If this is an issue, why has the district not planned or gotten more busing within the past year to accommodate all the children? Why not have 2 sessions with bus students in the morning and walkers in the afternoon? Why have the classrooms not been provided with plexiglass dividers in hopes of getting more children into in-person learning? Other schools have been using federal funds for these items. We have had positive COVID cases in our schools, and there have been no transmission among the classrooms. The distance of the desks and mask wearing has proven to work. So what is the next step for the Board of Education to get all of our children into the classroom to get an education that our children deserve? Thank you, Chantel.
So, Dr. Zaga, I guess we could reach out to her to have a further discussion
Sure.
on her issues that she brought up. We do thank her for her comments.
Okay.
Are there any other emails received
Yes.
from the public?
Yes, there's a couple more. This is from a Tara Polino. Good evening, Dr. Zaga. After listening to your YouTube video update, I would like clarification on your statement below. Any barriers or partitions doesn't change 6 feet of distance. They would still have to be 6 feet apart. According to the New Jersey Government Department of Education Restart and Recovery Plan, it states the following. If the schools are not able to maintain this physical distance, additional modifications can be considered. These include using physical barriers between desks and turning desks to face the same direction, rather than facing each other, or having students sit only one side of the table spaced apart. Many other school districts, including the one that I work for, is utilizing this modification. Please clarify. I look forward to hearing from you. Regards, Tara Polino.
Dr. Zaga, can you clarify your message from today based on her question?
Yes, from what I understand, the 6 feet of distance is still required whether there's plexiglass or not. And this is part of what we're battling as a school district, because yes, the CDC has said 6 feet, but the American Association of Pediatrics has said 6 feet or 3 feet. So it's a difficult task for us to decide which is which. As the previous member of the public mentioned, what we've been doing in school has been effective, and it's been effective because we're keeping our students 6 feet apart. And that is what was recommended in the very beginning from the CDC. However, today I saw a couple of articles online that says the CDC is considering changing that 6 feet to 3 feet. That is speculation right now, but until anything changes, and until, remember, the CDC is a federal organization, any decisions that they make have to be approved not only by the New Jersey Department of Health, but the New Jersey Department of Education. So there are several governing bodies that are all giving recommendations and all talking about what's best. It's up to the school district to decide which is best, which is safest, and which will protect our students and our staff from outbreaks. We have had positive students and positive staff in our buildings. We have not had any outbreaks because of the safety precautions that we've taken. And we'll continue to take these precautions until something changes. It's difficult when our schools close because we have 26 schools. 4 of them right now have had to switch to fully remote, not because of outbreaks, but because of quarantines. And none of those 4 schools would have had to close if we were able to vaccinate all teachers. And I think that's really what's going to help us in the future. We have some plans to make vaccinations more available to our staff, and that, as you know, that information just went out this afternoon. We're partnering with Hackensack Meridian Health and JFK Hospital to get our teachers scheduled for vaccinations. That would just be for teachers. They wouldn't have to go through the regular channels. And that's a big step in the right direction. But whether the teachers are vaccinated right now or not, it doesn't help us with the 6 feet of distance between students in our schools. So we're hoping that some of these things change. It's just very frustrating when different organizations are making different recommendations, but still we have to have what we are doing approved not only by the Department of Health and the Department of Education, but also by our local health officials, which scrutinize what our plans are and what we do every day. The one thing for sure is we will do what's safest, and I think we've been doing what's safest, and that has kept any major outbreaks from breaking out in our schools. We have a couple more. This is from Carolyn Barrientos. Good afternoon, Dr. Zega. Thank you for today's video update. I was just curious to know what, if any, improvements are being made to the school's ventilation system. Being indoors with large groups of people is a major factor in the spread of COVID and maybe other communicable diseases. I'd like to know what are the plans for improving air circulation, especially during winter months. Thank you, Carolyn Barrientos. Fortunately, the district several years ago installed unit ventilators in every single one of our classrooms. These unit ventilators cycle fresh air from the outside into the classrooms, and all of our classrooms are fully ventilated. In addition, just about every classroom has either a window air conditioner or a central air conditioning unit, an HVAC system that will provide further ventilation. And of course, we could always open the windows. Last one. This is from a Donna Hastrup. Good afternoon, Dr. Zega. It was great to hear from you today. Thank you for the update. It was informative and it answered questions I believe the parent community have been pondering. Please know that your dedication to keeping our students and school communities safe throughout this ongoing pandemic is beyond appreciated. My children have been fully remote and hybrid. Although the situation this pandemic has created is not ideal, nor the norm that we are accustomed to, they have remained safe and have managed to learn. Their teachers have been phenomenal. I have witnessed many go way above and beyond for their students. It has also been my experience that the principals have the students' well-being and safety as their first priority. As always, thank you for all you do as our school district superintendent. Please stay safe. Sincerely, Donna Hastrup. And that concludes the emails.
Okay. So I just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge and recognize Laura Zucchino. She was very brave, and I just want to acknowledge the heroic efforts that she had on February 27th and taking care of one of our residents here in Woodbridge. And so we acknowledged her tonight by giving her a resolution. I also wanted to acknowledge the fact that tonight the Equity Commission adopted an anti-racism pledge, which was created by a cohort of students from Ford's Middle School and Colonia High School. So our next steps with our anti-racism pledge is that the schools will be planning activities to implement the pledge throughout all of our schools. So I just want to congratulate those students and the Equity Commission for working with them to work to have that pledge placed. We also, the Equity Commission also approved certain textbooks that will actually help with kindness for all of our students. And so we also wanted to acknowledge the effort that was put together by Mr. Ali as far as helping us have those new books in our curriculum. So on that note, the chair will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So motion?
I have a motion by Mr. Molnar, seconded by Mr. Treewaser. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried. Meeting is adjourned.